Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. It is a glorious day, and we have a glorious topic for you on incident response. And my number one goal with this topic is not to give Lauro any flashbacks. So I apologize in advance, Lauro. I know this can be a difficult thing to talk about, but dealing with those long nights. That said, why don't we, before we go into the nightmares, why don't we talk about the news? Mike, you want to kick us off?
We've got some news tailored towards incidents, so it'll dovetail into our incident response conversation today. 740 ransomware victims named on data leak sites in Q2 2021 report. More than 700 organizations were attacked with ransomware and had their data posted to data leak sites in Q2 of 2021. According to new research from Digital Shadows. Out of the almost 2,600 victims listed on ransomware data leak sites, 740 of them were named in Q2 2021, representing a 47% increase compared to Q1. Of that, more than 350 of the organizations were based in the US.
I think that's a small number. I think that we can guess they probably got 80% of the accuracy for the ones that were reported to that site. So
well, yeah, I mean, that's just those reported to the site. There's those that aren't reported to the sites. Those are just pay. It's going up. 7 or 8 0 days, the failed race to fix Kaseya VSA with Victor Gevers. Victor Gevers is a Dutch security researcher. So anyway, this is off of Malwarebytes. Kaseya VSA included at least 7 or 8 privately known zero-day vulnerabilities before it suffered a widespread ransomware attack that impacted hundreds of businesses and security. Gevers revealed that Kaseya VSA vulnerabilities represent just one data point in a far larger and more worrying trend. The internet-facing remote administration tools are rife with flaws, and that as organizations increasingly rely on such tools for working from home environments, cybercriminals will increasingly discover, target, and exploit those flaws. That's something I think we've been talking about for a while. With the MSP issues and those sort of things that we need to be concerned about. It's definitely covered in the book. So, and in case you were safe with Linux, there is a new vulnerability called Sequoia, a local privilege escalation vulnerability in Linux's file system layer. Successful exploitation of this vulnerability allows any unprivileged user to gain root privileges on the vulnerable host. Qualys security researchers have been able to independently verify the vulnerability, develop an exploit, and obtain full root privileges on default installations of Ubuntu 20.04, 20.10, 21.04, Debian 11, and Fedora 34. So Oracle isn't safe either. Oracle warns of critical remotely exploitable WebLogic server flaws. Oracle on Tuesday released its quarterly critical patch update for 2021 with 342 fixes, including some that will allow a remote attacker to take control of an affected system. And lastly, just 3 additional headlines. Atlassian asked customers to patch critical Jira vulnerability. Thousands of Humana customers have their medical data leaked online by threat actors. And finally, our buddies at Microsoft share a workaround for Windows 10 0-day called Serious SAM. So those are all things that would be considered incidents when they happen, and we'll talk about how to deal with those later. Lauro?
Yeah, no, that was all good stuff. A lot of alliteration in the news this week, it seemed like. Gosh. All right. Well, for exploitation this week, if you happen to be a company that is hanging out with that 50-year-old bachelor that still dresses like a 20-year-old, yeah, I'm talking about WordPress. Well, let me tell you, they're still dating that prostitute that does heroin and crack cocaine and all that, because we've got a lot of plugins this week for exploitation. So for WordPress, if you're using the Simple Post, there's a stored cross-site scripting for that. If you're using the Fix Your Title plugin, there's a stored cross-site scripting for that. If you're using the Memetic Books plugin, there's a default publisher ID field that's also a stored cross-site scripting. And if you've got LearnPress or 326 or 327, you've got a privilege escalation on 326, and on 327, you've got a SQL injection from an authenticated perspective. And if you're using the plugin Popular Post, you've got a remote code execution for that. And I'm sorry, not finally, but finally, if you've got Current Book, one of the book sharing plugins, there is a author field stored cross-site scripting for that. So you are living in the danger zone if you're dealing with WordPress today. So watch out for that stuff and make sure you got your plugins updated. And that's all for exploitation.
The WordPress is
Zach,
kind of the Arby's of technology.
pretty much. We got the meats. We got the meats.
we need to do something, and welcome any ideas from the listeners, but we need to do something if we get and go for more than 3 weeks without any significant exploits from WordPress and Microsoft. So if we could go for 3 weeks and there's nothing significant, we should throw a party. We should do something that
it'll never happen. You got to lower your expectations. You got to make it like 3 days.
I know, but I kind of like one of those, kind of a game, of sorts, like in a manufacturing plant when it's been 15 days since any incidents, whatever, and then they get to keep adding. And if they hit 100 days,
I get it. I get it. But I'm just saying, you got to make the game winnable. I mean, at least somewhat achievable. I think 3 weeks there's no way. I wouldn't give them 7 days.
And it doesn't have to be no exploits at all. Just nothing serious. Just minor trivial things. I'd even be okay with that, right? Just nothing serious. But yeah, you're probably
all right.
right.
I'm in.
Probably a lost cause.
No, I'm in. It might be a lost cause. It's like one of those games that you just never get to win. Throwing the controller at the screen.
Well, we'll see. And sad to hear about Oracle this time, but it's something different. So,
I threw that in there because, why not? We haven't talked about Atlassian either for a while. And Oracle's got their share of messes as well.
Well, I think that's important because they're all, with all of this stuff happening, they're all in the middle of incident response, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Well, that was the whole idea. And then that 740 people in the malware on the ransomware, that's all incidents. And
at what point does incident response no longer become incident response, but just a way of life?
Operations.
Yeah. Wake up today, deal with the breach, move on.
Yeah,
business as usual.
I imagine that WordPress has like an incident operations department. That's all they do.
I don't know how they handle that stuff. I mean, because it's being all open source. I wonder who. Yeah, I guess it's the community, but there's got to be somebody there dealing with this stuff, I would hope. But
I love the fact that Microsoft positions themselves as a security vendor and, has all this influence with the government on security, yet you can't go a day without a Microsoft issue.
Yeah, I'm not letting the barber with a bad haircut touch my hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
Well, why don't we talk about incident response and hopefully share some knowledge that helps people. And the goal behind all this, of course, is that you don't have to ever deal with it, right? So that's the proactive side. That's what we spend a lot of time talking about, building an effective cybersecurity program and all that. But even with all that, there will be incidents, right? I mean, that certain things can happen. It doesn't have to be a breach. It can just be something is going on with your technologies that you need to investigate, right? So why don't we talk about first, I was going to ask, why do you need an incident response plan for those people that are fairly new to this and are thinking about building this stuff for the first time? But rather than why, because I think that's blatantly clear in today's environment, do you have any stories you guys are willing to share? And not to put you on the spot, no pressure, but any stories about any organizations, without naming names, that have had a major incident that did not have an incident response plan and wish they did afterwards? Anything you're willing to share?
Oh, dirty laundry. Okay. You want to pull out, do you want the dirty sock or would you rather have like a dirty pair of drawers? I mean, dirty shirt.
No details, no detail. I don't even need to know.
Well, of course,
we can't. Just a high level. I just know it's dirty, right? That's all. That's sufficient.
Okay, well, it's dirty. Okay, yeah. So organization, they're in a very specific part of the, I guess, the job families here and business families here in the United States. So, anyways, got a lot of data, and they had put in some pretty cool security technologies, but they hadn't turned them on, which I think is interesting. And then they'd also kind of leveraged Windows Defender in its base form, right? Like old school Windows Defender, like the Windows Defender that like came on Windows 7, like that Windows Defender. And they've got that kind of as a, their daily, anti-malware. And so when they got hit, they had, absolved the Emotet variant. And so when that happened to them, it, no documentation. There were like a small, they had a good IT team, right? Maybe 10 or 12 people, solid individuals, but no maturity around cybersecurity program or doing these incident response or trying to understand business continuity, plan of actions, any of that, none of it done. And so, what do they do? That they have to call for help, right? And they had to learn the hard way the benefits of having these things in place, and then also practicing with your technologies that you purchase. I think that happens a lot. Is that the business doesn't trust some of the technologies that go in, and it's a I don't want to contribute to the vaccine situation that's happening, but there's some really cool technologies that you can install that can use artificial intelligence decision making to help you and to alleviate attacks that are happening. But I think what happens is a lot of organizations are real reluctant to turn those devices on, and that's what'll happen, right? And so in this case, no incident response, no planning, led to a mass takeover with a ransomware variant that ended up costing the organization lots of money. They didn't end up having to pay a ransom because of some clever individuals. But I think that all of the other stuff and the cyber insurance and all of the time it took to bring everything back, because they had to come back from square one.
High dollar attorneys. Very
high dollar attorneys.
So are you saying if you're paying for a security platform for say 6 months or a year, that you should actually turn it on?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
You probably should.
Probably good advice. Makes decent sense, I'd say. So.
Yeah, but more so than that, I think that had they practiced some of this stuff or kind of understood what to do when things happen, it would have put them in a better place, right? I mean, it was most of the time it's either there's two things, right? And I think this attributes back to pretty much anything in life. The people who practice things, and you can call them, we'll go for like the preppers and the bug out, right? That whole genre of individuals, right? They go and practice things, and maybe I watched this on Netflix, right? And so this guy had a boat, and like he took it down the river, and he had this little hut way out in the middle of the woods, and he had like this device where he would blow the tree, and the tree would fall in the river so he could stop people from chasing him. And they would practice this a couple times a year. Okay, that same thing, what it does, and for the military people, you understand that there's a repetition of practice builds this sort of kind of a comfortability under a high stress time. And it just, you just like paramedics or everybody else, they train, right? And that's something that you sort of inherit from seeing that or playing these like games out over and over again, right? And then when finally the real time happens, it's sort of a second nature to react. Now you know what to do. You don't have to think about, right?
In this particular case, how long? So tell us how long the organization was down. Basically, people couldn't work. Basically, operations stopped as it stood, as it happened. And then how much quicker they have responded and been back online had they had an appropriate plan in place?
Sure. So I want to say it happened on like a Thursday. They didn't really figure out what was going on until Friday, and by Saturday they were in a panic mode, basically asking for help at that point. And so when I think it was a Saturday afternoon that I got involved. So here's the thing: is that for the techie guys out there, this is an organization that relies on Active Directory. Okay, so as you've got your domain controllers, you know that they kind of are a very fundamental piece in an Active Directory core structure. So they had 14 or 15 of them. All of them are compromised with ransomware. Okay, so they're down. And so this week, so we're rolling into Sunday and Mondays, still just kind of a chaotic couple days to trying to contain, right? And we'll talk about those processes probably here in a minute, right? The containment part of incident response, but we're trying to contain this from happening, right? Because it's ransomware, so it's replicating itself over and over again to different systems, and so we're trying to basically just contain this, and at the same time trying to rebuild, because the first thing that happened was for whatever reason, the domain, it was very structured, but the domain controllers were pretty much the first thing that happened in the attack. Because after the ransomware got a domain admin account, that was the first thing it went for, right? That was the first thing that they did. They deployed to the domain controllers. So the domain controllers are completely wiped out, as well as other servers. Okay, so rolling into Monday, team realizes this is a pay week. So they have, I don't know, a couple hundred, maybe 200 or 300 employees and contractors that are expected to get paid this week. So that's not going to happen. They're going to have to write paper checks, right? It's not ACH and all that stuff's not going to go down this week. So they've got a way, at least they've got a mitigating factor, right? They can bring people in, but they've got a whole huge remote force now, right? So now we've got 500 or 600 or 700 laptops, and maybe they were bigger than that. Maybe there were more, maybe it was more like 800 or so people, but they have all these laptops now that are in various places that are all on the Active Directory VPN that are now have the ransomware as well. So now there's this mass call that goes out for employees to start bringing their workstations in to get re-imaged and reissued, so that they could continue to do some of their consulting gigs. So that pretty much wiped out the first, like, from that Monday to the next, like, Tuesday or Wednesday. And so it was probably, I want to say that it was about, we were able to bring back Active Directory controllers and core business systems probably within 6 to 7 days. And then I want to say that from once we got them to a stable point, I want to say they still had about a month and a half to 2 months before they were back to normal operations.
Wow.
Zach. So I want to say it might have taken them 2.5 months total to maybe 3 months to recover. I wouldn't even say 100%. I'd say that that's probably 80% recovery. And then they're still trying to figure out what they don't know.
And had they had a proper plan in place with the backups tested and everything else, what do you think that would have shortened the time to?
Probably a day or two, maybe less, because what was happening here is that they were in a virtualized environment. I know people are thinking, well, why didn't they back up? They didn't really have a backup strategy. They were taking snapshots. Okay, so they had some snapshots, but it wasn't like core data. It was like operating system based snapshots, right? For building systems and for in dev and test. So some of the things, like were they had the capabilities to do it. But to answer your question specifically, had they been thought this process out and said, okay, well, what happens if the Active Directory controllers go down? How do we rebuild? They would have worked themselves through this kind of problem, reaction, solution scenario where they find what's happening, what are we going to do about it, and then how do we resolve back to normal, and then would have realized that the snapshot methodology that we're using wasn't sufficient enough to bring back core computing systems in a short amount of time. So they would have seen that in the demonstration of this exercise and been like, okay, well, that's not going to work. We need to think of something else, right? Well, maybe if we take system state data and then move it offline to this, or or something else, or increase the frequency of the snapshots, and then provide an offline backup. So there's, there were things that they could have maybe done through exercise and thinking through the process of incident response and business continuity that would have helped them recover, because the proper technologies, like in a Docker or something like that, would have helped them recover in hours. They could have been back up. Now I'm not talking about the laptops. That part of the collateral damage is what it is, right? The physical assets you have to repair, that's just going to be the time it takes for people to bring their things in, right? Unless you've got some form of advanced malware that can do some really incredible sandboxing and remote removal. Otherwise you're going to be bringing those machines in probably, and you may still want to do it even if your malware says it's contained, but you need to take a manual step to remove the rest of the the malware. So you're going to want to bring those physical assets in anyway. But for core business operations, right, your servers, your databases, your core systems for the business, that stuff should be 99% uptime. Like if things hit it, you should be able to tear down and rebuild within hours. And so that running those exercises and having that documentation, I think would have greatly increased their recovery time.
Critical. Well, let's talk about, I mean, that perfect example. I think it's crystal clear why an incident response plan is needed, and not just a plan on paper, but tested and such. So let's talk about the development of an incident response plan from the point of view of an organization that's never put one in place. Let's just say start from the ground up. We need to build an incident response plan. What do we do? What's the process? How should we be thinking about that? And Mike, I know you love to write this type of stuff up and plan these types of things. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, you have to start with identifying your key resources, and then you need to identify your key components that may be affected, and you're going to have to, do the research to determine what kind of incidents may happen. One of the flaws that I see a lot of these incident response plans is they get so into the weeds on some of this stuff that they take everything into account and turn a document that should be 12 or 15 pages into something that's 60 pages long and cumbersome and basically unusable because they've put everything into there instead of trusting into the knowledge of some of their people. So, identify your people, develop your RACI properly, understand who needs to be involved and who doesn't, and decide, what instances need the most attention. And when we talk about incident, let's just be clear. We're not talking about a single point of ransomware. Someone opens a phishing email and the antivirus software, Carbon Black or whatever that's on there happens to grab it and it's done. That is an incident, but we're talking about major incidents here. We're not talking about minor incidents, right? So anything that can be handled by your tier one at your help desk is not really truly an incident. So, that's your plan. You write it out, you decide who needs to be involved, and then you put together certain scenarios. You put together a workflow, decide who has to be engaged from a non-technical perspective for anything major that occurs. Start from there. So you just have to think it through. And then the other key piece is testing it and make sure it works, make sure people know what they're doing. The worst tabletop exercises we have for IR is when one person is the only one that speaks, and it's the director. And then, we go through tabletop exercise. We have these technical people here, and the only one talks is the director because he's the only one that's ever seen the IR document.
Yeah, not a good position to be in. How would you guys suggest setting up? So you have your incident response plan in place, documented. You have your workflows. You have severity level classifications, your points of contact, right? How would you recommend disseminating it, getting everybody that needs to be involved on board and making sure that they understand what it is they're supposed to do?
Tabletop exercises, I think, is what we see the most, has the most value. And I think it's the most fun part of it, I think. But, to kind of add on to what Mike said, when you're developing this documentation, get your, start thinking through okay, so great example, right? Just you're dependent on Office 365. Okay, what happens if for whatever reason Office 365 gets some DNS attack in the future, right? And it's down. What is your backup method of communication with your employees, right? That sort of thing, right? How are employees supposed to communicate with each other? Little simple activities like that, right? Are part of this, right? Not just, someone clicks on a link and we get ransomware, or, Amazon East goes down, right? I mean, if something like that happens, there's probably bigger issues. But the tabletop exercises, I think, are how everybody can really get involved. And, not only are they required for compliance, we don't need to talk about that, right? This is just like good practice, right? If you're out there and you're a gun guy, you like to go to the range. If you're out there and you're golf, you like to go to the range. if you whatever sport you play, you like to go and you hone your skill, right? You at least keep up with your skill, and that's what incident response is. It's a skill that everybody needs to practice at. And those tabletop exercises, you get all of your people that are going to be in that emergency response team, right, Mike? So get all your critical people together. If you've got two network guys and they're the ones that manage everything, they both probably need to be on the incident response team. One of them might be sick. One of them might, go away. And so you want to have both of those. But if you've got a larger team, maybe only, you need maybe 2 out of 10, right, to be on that emergency response team. But pull from your critical business areas, get everybody in a room, and come up with a scenario. It's real easy. You can do it on a whiteboard. You can do it. We do it in a spreadsheet, with Zoom calls, and we say, okay, the time is 11:01 a.m. and we just got notified from a client that our website is sending out malware, is serving out malware, the business website serving out malware. What do we do? Ready, go. And then start trying to induce that critical thinking in your people. And it starts right there, I think, to get everybody involved.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. And you always want to in a secondary for every type of contingency. So even from the accounting department, you want a primary and a secondary. And from HR, you want a primary and a secondary. It also all ties into the BIA, the business impact analysis as well. That'll help you identify what applications are the most critical and that would really warrant function and actually note in your incident response document. So one of the things that you do need to make sure that you update your documents regularly, because if you're referring to your secondary communication as the on-call pager, I don't know anybody that has pagers anymore. So
hit me up, 143.
Yeah.
When you have to pull out the scrolls and unroll them to identify the horseman that will take the message. That's definitely a problem. I think people are still relying on documentation, incident response plans that have been built by people that left the company 5 years ago, and it hasn't been pulled out and dusted off since then. So look at these things every year, at least.
Yeah. The living document idealism, we need to start talking about that, because there's two types of documents. There's a dead document, right? That's something that's like a law or court or something, a memo. And then there's a living document, which falls under all of these standards, policies, incident response included, right? These documents need to be updated regularly. They need to be looked at regularly. I mean, and Mike and I know that in some organizations, there's a team of people that manage the documents.
Yeah. And honestly, from a SOC 2 perspective, from a PCI perspective, from any compliance perspective, those documents need to be updated a minimum every year and after every major change. And that's really what needs to happen.
Yeah, because a good auditor is going to look at something that you've got running on the infrastructure, and they're going to look at the document and cross-reference to, validate that the evidence, is substantiates that you're doing the right things, both programmatically and technologically. And we're going to see a difference, right? Somebody's going to see a difference and be like, well, you're doing this, but how come the document doesn't say this? Or vice versa, right? The document says you're doing this, but we haven't located a technology that provides this function.
Yeah, and just like in your incident response document, dealing with your 2008 servers probably isn't all that important in the year 2021.
Now, before we wrap up too, I want to share something that I think a lot of people miss or don't understand going into this from the beginning. If you have an incident and you're just randomly calling a incident response company, Googling for people to help you, it's already failed, right? Because you haven't set yourself up properly. So of course there's your planning and such, but you need to have cyber insurance. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious in this day and age. And you need to go through your cyber insurance firm in advance to understand their approved vendors for incident response. Talk with those vendors, pick one or two, have their contact information, that documentation, all that. Make sure these are companies that specialize in incident response, that have 24/7 people on the line ready to go when something happens, and approved through your insurance provider. Otherwise, your insurance provider, if you just go out randomly, chances are most of them are going to pay probably half or less of the actual cost. Versus if it's a pre-approved vendor, they're going to pay a lot more. So go through your cyber insurance provider to get yourself prepared for this. And also you need to have an attorney. You need to have an attorney involved when an incident occurs and investigation is underway by a third party. The attorney is there to protect you. So have an attorney identified, again, one that either specializes or does a tremendous amount of work in incident response and understands it. And the reason for that is, and the Capital One breach was a clear case of this. And I'm not an attorney by any means, never even played one on TV, but to paraphrase what happened, essentially Mandiant was a cybersecurity service provider for Capital One on an ongoing basis. Well, they were also brought in to do the incident response in the breach. And basically the court deemed that because they had been providing ongoing services that this work that was done was really between Capital One and Mandiant, and was basically subpoenaed, right? So the opposing counsel could get access to all the details of the breach investigation that was performed by Mandiant. So when you go about this, you don't want to have your evidence, you don't want to have your breach investigation information handed over to opposing counsel in the event of a lawsuit, because then they could say, oh, they could point at anything they want really and say, oh, this is negligence, this is negligence, this is negligence, and really try to use that against you. So have an attorney. The attorney engages the incident response firm. You don't engage the incident response firm, the attorney does, right? Because that way you maintain client attorney privilege for those findings, right? So again, this is not legal advice, but this is what we know through experience and having dealt with these types of things in the past. You need to have those parties involved. A pre-selected couple of incident response firms, a good attorney or two, and your cyber insurance provider all together, and have that documented, ready to go. So hope that helps, just because, again, so many people reach out at random when an incident occurs and they need help, but they're already going about it the wrong way and could get themselves in a lot of trouble down the road. So not to make it too serious of a conversation or anything, but I think that's important for people to know.
Well, totally.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they're gonna try to get damages, refunded through insurance claim, right? So
yep,
you got to play by the insurance rules. So it's good to know that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you need to be mindful of as well is that some of these contracts for insurance do require forensic work, and some don't. And you need to be sure that you know which one you have before you can bring a laptop in that's been exposed and has ransomware on it or malware on it, and you wipe it, and you've just voided your cybersecurity policy. Because they can't.
Excellent point.
Yeah,
Excellent
chain of evidence. Yeah, you've got to maintain that. So yeah, they're going to require. So yeah, but again, incident response plan, practice, and one of those first steps should be: do we have cyber insurance? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, we need to contact them.
Yeah, and so I didn't mention this earlier, but the simplest thing to do is, and I think you brought this up, Laura, is just get in a room, like we do with a lot of things, and just interview key resource and say, all right, what do you do here? What do you do here? And then you develop your document from there.
The Bobs?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referencing?
Yep, the Bobs.
So what do you do here?
What would you say you do here, Bob? Excellent talk. Any final smart remarks or questions, ideas, thoughts for the audience, requests before we jump off?
No, I think, I don't know. I hope this was a good talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I think if you're just starting in this, like Mike said, get in a room, start going through all of your critical technologies, critical services, and the critical people that manage those critical services, and then go through some scenarios on what happens when you check one off, and how does everybody react.
And you can always engage an outside company to interrogate your people. I mean, you can always buy 8, 10, 12 hours of a consulting practice for someone to help you develop it if you don't want to develop it internally. Let them conduct the interviews.
Yeah, Mike and I will come in and do the inquisitions. That's fine.
But you still have to bring the bagels and donuts and coffee.
Absolutely. We only work when there's bagels and donuts and coffee.
That's part of it, part of the requirement. So yeah, have a good pizza, a local, pizza shop on your incident response plan too, because your people are going to get hungry. So that's my advice.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long night.
It's going to be a long couple weeknights. you need to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner planned for your teams, because you may be 5 days, 24 hours a day.
I remember the .com era when we were still trying to bust stuff out to market, and we'd work 18, 24 hours a day straight, multiple days in a row. And the executives thought it was okay as long as they provided us pizza, that was, it would satisfy all our needs to do that for a month straight. And it's like, no, dude, we're not.
Like, no, and I need Red Bull too.
Yeah.
And that's why scripting took off, to
automate
the tasks. Thank goodness.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and joining us. If you bought a copy of the book on Amazon, please give it a rating. Let us know what you think, and let us know what you think of the podcast. Reach out anytime. cyberrantspodcast.com. There's a web form there. You can do different requests or reach out on LinkedIn. Let us know what's on your mind, what we can talk about, and what types of information you'd like us to share, or stories, or just ranting. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants Podcast.